Explanation. Education.
With regard to upbringing, it must be absolutely clear that upbringing cannot ever take place through parents, etc., nor can the character and behavior of human beings be shaped by the upbringing of educators, etc. Education is also not somehow related to the previous lived personality, because the doctrine of reincarnation can and should never be taken into account in order to understand anything. It must therefore be completely clear that every thought, every form of character, behaviour, attitude and action, etc., is neither inherited nor somehow predetermined, etc., because every new personality that is born arises according to its own thoughts, behaviour and actions, and according to its own character to be formed. Every new personality, that is to say, every human being, forms itself accordingly, through its self-education, according to how and what it absorbs from its direct and indirect environment, and thus shapes and forms its thinking, decisions, actions, and behavior. This makes it clear that it is always and in every case the absolutely personal self-education that determines everything and every thought, decision, action, and behavior, as well as the attitude and, if no illness prevents it, the reason and intellect of the human being, and what becomes character and behavior. Consequently, any education by parents or other guardians is pure fantasy, because it is absolutely impossible to educate a human being, as they educate themselves in every case, and therefore shape their own character and behavior. This takes place in every single case, and therefore with every human being equally, and in fact absolutely surely and inevitably, in such a way that, at his own discretion and will, he appropriates for himself in terms of character and behavior what he hears, sees, or experiences. In this way, he shapes himself through his thoughts, attitudes, actions and behavior, etc., according to the various influences that affect him. These influences, which come from other people, etc., and have and are intended to have an educational effect, normal, coercive, frightening or even violent, threatening or loving, etc., from parents or grandparents, as well as from other so-called guardians, from acquaintances, friends or foreigners, have the same effect on every human being in each individual case. They do so in such a way that they accept or reject them based on their own judgment. That is to say, they fit into something that is ordered, simply presented or taught to them. Ultimately, however, it is the case that, through his own decision, he consolidates or rejects in himself, in terms of character and behavior, what is brought to him educationally, in an indoctrinating, hearsay, fear-inspiring, neutral, normal, loving, threatening, or violent way. Depending on whether or not he accepts what he is taught, or whether he adapts or rejects his character and behavior accordingly. He shapes his self-education at his own discretion, over which an educator never has any influence whatsoever. This therefore means that every human being carries out self-education in his life according to what he perceives from the outside through his hearing and all his senses of perception, whereby everything outside serves as a model for him if he aligns his senses accordingly, whereby one forms his character and behavior in a self-educational way. This is precisely the case when self-education is indoctrinated and sustainably shaped in terms of character and also behavior according to a role model. However, if this role model self-education does not materialize, but is effectively rejected, then human beings carry out a form and wise form of self-education that is chosen either positively or negatively, depending on how the human being consciously builds up his or her attitude and behavior. every example of self-education, however it may take place, as well as self-education in the positive or negative sense, entails that the human being has a certain character and develops a format that determines his mind and his disposition. How it determines his entire character, his nature or disposition, and the nature of his personality, as well as his temperament and disposition, his nature or essence and nature, or his overall profile. The influences of other people, their ways of thinking, actions and behaviour, etc., are factors that absolutely influence and shape, or not, the thinking, dispositions and forms of decision-making, actions, character formation, desires and behaviour of the developing human being. And this happens according to what he accepts or rejects for himself. In other words, it is determined by whether he is positively or negatively influenced by what is brought to him from the outside, whether he evaluates this, his behaviour and his attitude, etc., either positively or negatively, as just or unjust, normal or degenerate, positive or negative. So it is never the upbringing of parents, grandparents or other guardians, etc., but always and in every case, if it is not a disease or pathological Ausartung, always the self-education of the human being himself. However, he also degenerates or degenerates. All other scientific and psychological explanations are and remain only nonsensical assertions, as they could not be more ignorant and lowly intelligent, as Farth explains. The human being as such should form himself into a true human being in every form and wise, and develop effective integrity in his consciousness in order to be able to live and act in such a way that he can express himself personally with all the measures of his values through his behaviour. Developing personal integrity against everything negative is to be understood as loyalty to oneself and to one's own righteousness, whereby the human being with integrity lives honestly in his consciousness and acts in such a way that he is always able to express his standards and values honestly in all his personal correct thoughts in all his life, behaviour, conduct and actions. This characterizes absolute personal integrity, which, as loyalty to oneself, proves that absolute integrity and incorruptibility apply to him. Furthermore, integrity also stands for the decency and honesty of human beings, as well as for their righteousness, trustworthiness, absolute reliability, and profound trust. And these are the values of true and effective humanity, whose high values also mean true love, peace, and freedom, which must be cherished and nurtured. The effective true human being should be learnt from the ground up from early childhood onwards. However, truthfulness is often only learnt by human beings with great effort and necessity during their lives, if it is learnt at all, because it demands the hard existence of reality. Namely, that all negative things are rethought and a change towards the positive must take place, in particular towards honest and truthful humanity. This is because true humanity harbours extremely valuable qualities that are expressed when a person understands another person and empathizes with what is going on inside them and what moves them. In particular, these values are firstly mindfulness and empathy, which must always be characterized by respect and tolerance. Furthermore, honest respect, consideration and care must also be shown towards other human beings, because these are the absolute core values of what constitutes true human being, which, like true and profound love, true peace and effective freedom, must be cherished and nurtured in all honesty and firmness of character. When the term true and genuine humanity is used, it is of course also associated with humanity, as it also has a broader and narrower meaning, namely, that in the whole of true humanity, and humanity shown to fellow human beings, everything that belongs to or is proper to human beings and relates to them is respected. In this respect, these are all high values that distinguish human beings from animals, creatures, and all other life forms, which also defines the true human being's attitude and disposition, as well as human faults and weaknesses. Unfortunately, this is also linked to the fact that human beings as such make mistakes, because it is said that to err is human, but this does not and must never mean that they behave and think inhumanly and also act wrongly in this way. All these values mentioned, as well as many other behavioral values, are the practical themes of the Nicodemean teaching, which is the teaching of the truth, teaching of creation energy, teaching of the life, which should be learned by human beings on earth, and they should concern themselves with it, and thereby allow themselves to grow within themselves in order to become true human beings. In this respect, human beings should become true human beings and cultivate their true humanity, just as they should also appreciate and honor creation in the existence of all its energy and power of nature, and its fauna and flora, everything that exists in creation, and its endless existence. Sim Ya Se Silver Star Center, 21st April 2025, reproduction of April 1949. Billy.